Díobh daltaí Choláiste híde tá súil agam go bhfuil se bh bantat na bhil seachtain na Folláine, is mis a hena ó bliana sé agus tá le Tracy ó bliana hain. Aniu bé mud ag leir le Louise O'Neill is úidir as curcaig idir bhfuil atna agat an na leabhar asint agus only ever yours. When bhfuil tú léite agat mulamíid go láidir. Hi, Louise, it's very nice to have you here.
Hi. For a second there, I got really scared that you were going to ask me questions in Irish, and I was like, oh, because I did during lockdown, I took an evening class, but which was really funny because at the start I was like, oh, I could definitely do an intermediate, and then I said I'll chance the beginners, and I was like, I definitely should be in the beginners. I am so out of practice.
Yeah, so you don't have much Irish, or?
No, I mean, it's terrible. And, it's my latest book, After the Silence, is set on an Irish-speaking island off the coast of West Cork. So a friend of mine who is a native speaker, he helped me translate all the phrases. And yeah, so it was funny. And when he was like, I would ask him, is this how you say this? And he'd say, no, that's not, that's not how someone who, I suppose grew up speaking Irish would phrase that, or that's not how they would phrase that. And I felt, I don't know, I suppose it really brought home to me like the beauty of the language. I suppose sometimes when you're in school, it feels like a bit of a chore. Whereas, he would come back and explain the sort of etymology behind a phrase, and it just was so beautiful. So I had some grand ambitions of myself being fluent by the end of lockdown, which did not come to pass. So please don't test me, I beg you.
Won't be a problem. We won't ask you anything else in Irish. Yeah. We have a few questions for you to do with mental health and just being a writer in general. Tracy's going to ask the first question.
Hi. So I'm just wondering, when did you first realize you wanted to be a writer?
Oh, that's such a good question. And probably later in life. I mean, I think as a child and sort of all the way into my adolescence, I really wanted to be an actress, a stage actress. And then I studied English at Trinity, and I think it was there that I was like, I always loved reading. I'd always loved storytelling. And of course, storytelling is so much part of the theatre as well. And like that kind of love of language. So I suppose I can see how the two of them are very closely linked, because so much of being a writer is, I think, understanding another person's motivations or their behavior, and trying to sort of, I suppose, walk in someone else's shoes and to create this character and for them to feel very real to you. And that's very much what acting is about as well. And it's funny, I always say that like in my third act of my life, like when I'm like, I don't know, later in my 70s or something, I'm like, oh, I'd love to maybe become a therapist. And in a weird way, I can sort of see how that's connected to both acting and to writing as well, because I think it's just this common thread of like, just I suppose being curious about human beings and human behavior and sort of the psychology of why people behave the way that they do.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's a good way to connect them all. Yeah, I see that.
And has your writing process been changed at all now that you're in lockdown? Are you thriving because of it with all of this free time, or do you find it hard to find inspiration?
Oh God, I mean, in the beginning, I really struggled. Like last March, which I think isn't uncommon. I think that everyone, I suppose, it was just this collective sense of sort of fear. No one really knew what was going on, and I think everyone was very, we were seeing these reports coming out of Italy, and it was like this real fear that was going to happen to us, and that maybe I suppose people who had vulnerable loved ones or who were vulnerable themselves, I think were just feeling like just very frightened, I think. So I found it very difficult to create under those circumstances. And then I suppose, like, human beings are so resilient that you just kind of have to get on with things. But, it's been interesting, and I'm not sure if other people are feeling like that, but I found this lockdown, since Christmas, I found this really difficult. And I know yesterday, I really felt like I hit a wall, and it's my birthday today, and I think there was a part of me that was like, oh, I'm not going to get to see my boyfriend on my birthday, and just things like that. So I really felt like I was kind of trudging through everything, like I was trudging through work, I was just trudging through the day, because I suppose it feels like all of the things that I suppose we take pleasure in, and like I know for like when I was younger, that would have been going out and going out with my friends and going clubbing, whereas now I suppose maybe it's more like just the theatre, the cinema, or going for a weekend away or going out for a meal. So it just sometimes feels like a lot of the pleasure has been taken out of life. So I'm just trying to sort of take really good care of myself, which I think is so crucial for everyone through this, to really sort of prioritize self-care and mental health, because they are being impacted by all of this.
So how long does it take for you to write a book?
It really depends. It's funny because when I first started writing, I used to write 1,000 words a day. So let's say if a book is like 90,000 words, oh God, now I'm gonna try. Now I'm gonna have to try and do math. So I'm like, wait. Okay, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna like, I've already told you I can't speak Irish. I can't shame myself. I can't add either. So in general, before it would have taken maybe 5 or 6 months to have a first draft done. But in 2019, my grandmother died, and we were very close, and I was just devastated, and I couldn't write anything for, I'd say it was nearly 6 weeks afterwards. And then I started panicking because I was like, I'm not going to meet my deadline. I'm really behind. So I made myself write 2,000 words a day. And now that I know I can write 2,000 words a day, I feel guilty if I don't. So I really miss the days where I was like 1,000 words and sort of out the door, yeah, so at the moment, it would normally take the first draft about 3 to 4 months, but that's like very fast, very messy. It's just getting all the words onto the page. And the editing, which is the part that comes after it, that's where, let's say, you have to reread it and fix it and rewrite sections and put, this bit from page 33 to page 120 because it's not working where it is, and getting rid of this character and bringing in another person. So like the first draft is kind of the easy bit nearly, and then afterwards with the editing and with the rewriting, that could take like another 6 months, another 8 months, and that's the really painstaking, slow, like really sort of getting in deep with it, and yeah. So I'm just about coming to the end of the first draft of the new book that I'm writing, and already I'm like dreading the edits because I'm like, oh, it's going to be really painful, but it has to be done.
Happy birthday, I suppose you could say. We read your the article you wrote for the Irish Examiner, where you talked about it. What's it like having a birthday in lockdown? How are you finding it?
I feel really bad because, well, firstly, I received 2 cards today from people I've never met and I don't know, who had read the column on Saturday and obviously felt incredibly sorry for me. So I've made, and it's funny because I'm not someone, normally I'm not that bothered about my birthday. I think maybe because it's like my sister's birthday was during the summer and that was always really fun. We'd have a barbecue, the weather was nice, like we'd have loads of people up. Whereas I suppose when your birthday's in February, I think January, February, nobody really wants to kind of do anything. And so I was always a bit like, yeah, grand. But this year, my parents and my sister are the only people in my bubble. So I told my mother, I was like, I want balloons, I want a cake, I want she arrived with the balloon today anyway, and she's currently baking the cake. So I was like, I really want a fuss made of me, and now I feel like such a baby because I'm clearly regressing to childhood, like demanding all of these things for my birthday.
I feel like a lot of people are doing that this year, though. It's a time where we kind of have to, look out for ourselves and put ourselves first. So do you have any tips for staying mentally healthy while we're in lockdown?
Oh God, I mean, there's so many things that I think, that I try and do, like I think exercise has been really important. And like I do a lot of like Joe Wicks, that stuff, like it's a HIIT workout. But actually, I got a dog in October and like he's been amazing because even if it's raining or if I'm not really in the mood for it, I still have to bring the dog for a walk. And I do think just walking and getting outside, like I think that's really crucial at the moment. And yoga is amazing. I think just kind of that opportunity to move your body. I think movement, activity, I think trying to frame that in a way, because so often I think with exercise, it's framed in this way of like, to do with weight or to do with the body, whereas actually I think that's really unhelpful. I think just put that aside and be like, I exercising because I want to feel better. I want to like lift my mood. I want to lift my energy. And even if that's just going out for a gentle walk, I think that's crucial. And there are loads of other things that I do. Like I meditate a lot, and I journal like a good bit. But what's funny as well? Like yesterday, as I said, I really hit a wall, and I'm doing Zoom sessions with my therapist. And I was just saying to her, I was like, I just feel so tired, and I feel really disinterested in everything, and I just feel like I can't find any joy in anything. And she said, well, you keep pushing, like you keep going, okay, I'll do some yoga, okay, I'm going to do this. And she said, actually, why don't you just go to bed, or why don't you just take a bath, or why don't you just put on something on Netflix and give yourself permission to sort of sit with the feeling of like, I feel sad today, or I feel fed up, or I feel like this is relentless. And actually what was so interesting was that I did that. I lit fire. I just sat in front of the television with my dog and did nothing. And I felt so much better after it. I think it was just naming it. It was just naming, I feel really sad today. I feel down. Like, and rather than trying to resist it, and rather than trying to push it away, and rather than trying to kind of just numb out, I think actually just sitting with it and saying and naming it. And I just felt so much better after that. So I think sometimes I think you really have to listen to yourself and listen to your body, and just, go with what your instincts are telling you as well.
So what one of your books is the favorite one?
Do you have brothers and sisters?
I have one sister.
Now, if someone asked your mother or your father which one of you was her favorite, how would you know? I'm joking. Sometimes as an author, you kind of feel like it is like someone saying which one is your favorite child. I don't know. I mean, they're all so different, and they all kind of, I think, mean different things to me. And they're, like, I suppose they were at different stages of my life. I suppose the last book, After the Silence, like I really enjoy the process of writing that. But then something like Asking for It, like that changed my life. It changed my career. And Only Ever Yours was the first book I ever. So I think they all. I'm sorry, I know that's that's a bit of a cop out. But that's the truth. But I don't know if I can pick a favorite.
I understand. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're your mother's favorite child. Spot there.
Who are your literary influences? Were there any books or writers in particular that like really stick out to you, that like encourage you to write?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, sometimes you'll hear people talk, they're like, oh, your book is influenced by this person or this person. And like, so often I suppose when you're writing, you're like, no, this is my voice and my story, and I don't really feel like I'm being influenced by anyone. But obviously, if you're a writer and you're reading other people's work, you are going to be, like you are going to sort of pick up on things, or especially when you start to write, you really start to look at books in a different way. You're kind of almost taking it apart to see how, kind of like, how did they do this and how did they achieve that? And so I don't know if I'm maybe the right person to say this particular author influenced me, but like, I love Marion Keyes, I love Curtis Sittenfeld, I love Meg Wolitzer, I love, I'm trying to think of other, like Margaret Atwood, John McGahern, Edna O'Brien. And recently, like, I've really loved books by like Kylie Reid, and she wrote Such a Fun Age, and Britt Bennett, who wrote The Vanishing Half, Celeste Ding. Like, honestly, now this could get boring. Like, I could just be here for like 10 minutes, like listing off people's names. But and I have to say, I'm really excited as well there's some incredible like young Irish women coming up, that I think are amazing. Like, I've read debuts. There was one in particular by a woman called Fee Scarlett, who wrote a book called Boys Don't Cry, which I was blown away by. So I think it's really exciting to see, I suppose, the next generation of Irish authors who are coming out with their debuts now.
So what do you like to do when you're not writing?
Oh God, I mean, at the moment I'm like, I have nothing to do. But in general, like, I suppose before I would have loved, as I said, going to the theatre, going to the cinema. My partner lives in Dublin, so I, would have gone to see him a lot. But here I live in West Cork, so I'm right by Inchdanny Beach, so I love to swim, take my dog for a walk. And I think I read a lot. I think most authors that you talk to, when you ask them what their hobby is, they're going to say reading. And that's kind of always been such a massive part of my life ever since I was a very small child. My mother was an English teacher. There were a lot of books in our house. So I think that's always been just my great pleasure, my great comfort. And I think, I suppose it doesn't surprise me in a way that maybe, or it shouldn't have surprised me that I became a writer, because, books and stories were just always such a great love.
Yeah.
And you lived in America for a while, is that right? What was
Yeah.
that like?
It was amazing. It's funny. I first went to New York when I was 12, I think, and I remember driving in from the airport, and that first kind of sight of the New York skyline, and I had this really strange feeling of kind of almost feeling at home in a way, which was very odd, because as I said, I'd never been there before. And I went back so many times, and I did my J1 in New York as well. And then when I was finished university, I think I felt like if I don't do it now, I really wanted to try it, just to see how I would get on. So I moved there. It was 10 years ago, actually, last September. And sorry, time has no meaning at the moment. I'm like, what day is it? My birthday, yes. But so I moved there, and I was working for a fashion magazine, and it was such an incredible experience. It's such an amazing city. Like, I would love to go back and live there again. And my sort of dream, I think, life would be sort of maybe 3 or 4 months every year in New York, and then the rest of the time in West Cork. So yeah, I just adored it. I mean, the industry itself was very high pressured, and like I just don't think I was suited to it. And it was like I loved the people that I met, and I still have some incredible friends from my time in New York. But I think you have to have a very certain type of personality, and I think I knew pretty early on. I was like, I don't think this is going to be like a right fit for me. But it was an amazing experience. I met the most incredible people, and it was just I just still feel really blessed. Like, it was such. I mean, I'm from Clonakilty. My parents own a butcher shop. Like, I don't know anyone in fashion. It still sort of baffles me how I managed to wrangle it. So it was just, as I said, an incredible opportunity, and one that I do feel very grateful for.
So how do you think writing helps with people's mental health?
It's funny, like, I've journaled for since I was about 8, I'd say. I mean, very basic journaling now, kind of like what I, ate for breakfast and what homework I was given, and usually about fighting with my sister. But I think I've always had that habit, and it is interesting, I suppose, because I had an eating disorder. I developed an eating disorder as a teenager, and I, would have had anorexia and then bulimia, and sort of back and forth for years. And so many, therapists would say, do you journal? And I was like, yeah, no, I journal every day. And they would have talked about how important that was, I suppose, as an outlet, as a way of expressing yourself. Because I think so often with mental illness or with mental health issues, so much of it is that we're not feeling our feelings, like we're numbing out, or we're trying, particularly with addiction, like you're trying to find a way to stop yourself from feeling those painful emotions, and whether you use food or drugs or alcohol or whatever that is, it's just a way of numbing out. Whereas I think with writing, particularly with something like journaling, you're kind of getting in touch with those painful emotions, and you're trying to put them on the page. And I think that's actually really healthy. And I suppose I've always found books really useful, because I know as a teenager, reading something and thinking, oh my God, I'm not the only person who does that or thinks that or feels like that, even though no one else has ever admitted that to me. And I think there was something in that, this sense of being seen, or this sense of like that you're not alone, that I think is really powerful. And you know, I found it really helpful as a teenager, and I'm sure that there's loads of people out there who will read a book and see themselves in it, and as I said, feel seen, which I think is crucial.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips for aspiring authors?
Oh God, I have so many. I actually think the most important thing, I mean, there's so many things that I could tell you, like, you know, just about, I suppose, you know, reading as much as possible, but I actually think on real practical terms, what I would say to people is set yourself small, achievable goals. Now, if you say to yourself that you're going to write 500 words, like 4 times a week, so like 500 words, you could set yourself an hour. Like you could set yourself an hour on a Monday, an hour on a Wednesday, an hour on a Friday, and an hour on a Sunday. And I'm just gonna write 500 words. Like you would have a book written in a year. Whereas I think sometimes people get really overwhelmed with the idea of like, oh God, this is a huge project and this is too enormous for me to even contemplate. Whereas actually you have to break it down into like very small sections. So like all you need to worry about is the next 500 words. You don't need to worry about what happens in chapter 17. You don't need to worry about what happens at the end. You just have to say, well, what's going to happen in these next 500 words? And if you kept doing that over and over and over again, you would have a finished manuscript. And I suppose then what I would encourage people to remember is that don't read your first draft and compare it to your favorite author's finished product, because like I know now, right, like my first draft that I'm writing at the moment is terrible. Like it's terrible, but like I know that like by the time I edit it, and by the time my editor helps me, and by the time the copy editor gets it, and by the time the proofreader gets it, so like by the time the reader gets their hands on a book of mine, it's probably the 15th edition, or the 15th sort of attempt at that novel. So if you're going to take your first attempt and compare it to someone else's 15th attempt and get so discouraged that you give up, it's just, I don't know, it's really disheartening. So I think that will be my advice. Just get the first draft done, and then understand that the work begins then. The true work begins then.
So, what book are you reading at the moment?
I am currently reading, it's a proof copy, and it's called The Divines, and it's by an author called Ellie Eaton, I think. Now, a proof copy means that it's kind of like an advanced reading copy, so you're sent this particular book won't be out, let's say, until May or something like that. So they send them to authors in the hope that you'll maybe give a bit of like an endorsement, or that you'll say on social media, I love this book. But I have to say I'm really enjoying it because it's set in a very posh boarding school and there's a murder, and I'm like, that's all I need. That's all I need. Genuinely, that is my jam. So I'm really, really enjoying it so far.
And if you had to recommend a book to people watching who maybe haven't read your books before, like what one would you recommend that they start with if they wanted to?
Oh, one of my novels.
Yeah.
Oh God, I'm not sure. I think actually, do you know what I will say about my books is that they're all so different that I think anyone who's listening, I would be like, do you like thrillers? Then read After the Silence. Do you like dystopian novels? Then read Only Ever Yours. And then if you want, I suppose, a contemporary novel, set in modern day Ireland, then Asking for It or All Love is going to be the best one. And I mean, if you were a massive fan of The Little Mermaid, then I have written a feminist retelling of The Little Mermaid called I have it all. I have it all. Just whatever you want.
That's great. I think we have all of the questions we wanted to ask. So yeah, just again, thank you very much for being here with us and speaking to us. Happy birthday. We hope you enjoy the rest of the day.
I'm so sorry. I feel like I've really forced my birthday into this conversation multiple times. But thank you very much for
it was in the notes. We were always going
to Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.